Welcome back to Justice for the Series. And 2020 was one heck of a year. So many things were happening around the country. Of course, we were locked inside for COVID, and then the social justice movement kicked into full gear. And tonight, we're going to talk about one of the biggest cases of 2020. And that's what happened in March of 2020 in Louisville, Kentucky, when a botched police raid caused the death of Breonna Taylor. And what I can say about this particular case is it touched me in a way that most cases don't. And that's because this one became personal. And so I just want y'all to take yourself back to the mindset of 2020, what you were doing, what you were witnessing, and then ultimately what we all saw, felt, and heard, and were summoned by the Say Her Name movement. So we're going to take a step back into 2020. We're going to have a conversation, and we're going to remember and press forward for justice. Keandra, back in 2020, what were you doing?
So, thank you, Greg. So, in 2020, I had a long year like everybody else, but aside from the pandemic, that was the year that I lost my spouse. So, the tail end of that year was kind of a blur to me, but I do remember this case specifically, even through a fog of grief. I remember this case specifically because I remember this as my first example in my adult life of how underprotected Black women are in this country. You know, you hear the phrase, the famous quote, the most disrespected person in America or the world is a Black woman, the most underprotected person is a Black woman. So you hear those quotes all the time. But Breonna Taylor, for me, was one of the first real life examples of that. And from my understanding, you were on the ground a lot with this case, right? Like you were out in the streets and interacting and at the protests, like you were actually boots on the ground with this protest, right?
Yes,
With
I
this
was
movement.
twice. And so that kind of leads me into one of my sheroes, my sister in the struggle, one of the clarion voices for civil rights and social justice in this era. Somebody that actually helped to get me involved with the women's march, and then ultimately the founding of Until Freedom, and specifically one of the people that has spearheaded the justice for Breonna Taylor. And so I want to introduce to some and reintroduce to everyone else Tamika D. Mallory, who is a prolific sister in the struggle, a civil rights leader, social justice leader, author. I mean, she's pretty much everything. And I'm just honored to have her as we have this conversation about Breonna Taylor. So welcome to Justice for the Series, Tamika Mallory.
Thank you so much, Griggs. I appreciate you. Everybody calls you Griggs, but you are attorney Gerald Griggs. Let me have put some respect on your name, and certainly Keandria. Thank y'all so much for having me on your show. I'm so excited that you all are doing this. I think that there is a need for more of us to fill the void. And to be in spaces having conversations that people can access, where there's truth that defies the misinformation and the disinformation that's out here. And so I'm glad that you all have said, we're going to claim our space and make sure that our voices are heard and that our people have options for where they get their information.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we started the Justice for series, is to be the voice of the people and to bring the information. And so we're going to kick it right into the introduction, and then we'll get started. What do you want?
Every headline fades. Every news cycle moves on. For the families, it never ends. And the fight for accountability continues. This is not about clicks. This is not about controversy. This is about the truth. The names that deserves justice. We are reopening and examining the files and the facts. Nothing more and nothing less. We're going to ask questions that people dare to ask. because justice delayed does not mean justice denied.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Can't fail me.
This is Justice for.
And so I just want to kind of set the table. I remember what I was doing when I first heard the name Breonna Taylor. And the first thing that came to mind was far too often the women who have been subject to police brutality and ultimately have lost their lives did not get enough push for accountability and justice. And then I saw Tamika Mallory on the front lines. And so I was summoned. I know the country was summoned. But Tamika, kind of tell us and take us back. Who was Breonna Taylor?
Oh, wow. Thank you for asking that question, Griggs. I came to know Breonna Taylor in a very intimate way through the relationship that I developed with her family and the local community. I'm very close to Tamika Palmer. She and I spell our Tamikas the exact same. So our parents, both moms, mom and dad, whomever, had good sense when they named us. And she became my sister. I still, to today, as I am with most of the families, probably all the families that I've worked with, I maintained strong relationships. And Tamika and I, we became cut up buddies, when we first met, she was kind of like, yeah, everyone has promised us, because you have to remember that Breonna had already been dead for 2 months, about 2 months before people began to kind of hear about her story. And so, by the time I showed up, she's like, yeah, everybody says what they're going to do, but I'm 2 months into my daughter being dead with no answers, no, nothing, just people not even acting like my daughter's life mattered at all. And so, I promised that we're going to be here. We're going to help you. We're going to work with you. We're going to support you. And you could tell that she was dismayed, one, and two, that Tamika didn't necessarily trust everybody. And I don't think that that's something that happened because Breonna had been killed. I think that's just Black women and how we look at people when they show up telling us all the things they're going to do and stand with us and, be by our sides. So she was like, we'll see. And thank you for coming, but we'll see how this goes. And, of course, I don't need to finish the story there because, as I've said, she and I have become sisters. So we know we kept our promise to stick by them. As you know, Griggs, you were there. You were present to know that we led, alongside the local community, we led a very, very robust movement, a passionate movement to stand up for Breonna and to ensure that she was not lost in the story between Ahmaud Arbery, who you had been, front and, on the front lines fighting with that family. And then, of course, George Floyd was also killed. And so Breonna was kind of sandwiched between. And you mentioned, Griggs, that women often don't get the attention that we deserve when we're victimized by the state. And so it would have been easy with all of the energy around these two men with these two horrific stories to kind of be lost, but we ensured that that did not happen. And so as time went on, I got to learn who Breonna Taylor was. And it was almost like she was a sister to me as well, because her family and her friends and her community was so passionate about her. And they were so impacted by who she was as a person: sweet, kind, hardworking, someone who filled many different roles in her family and her community. And she was just a person who showed up for people. She also was very close to her younger sister, Janiyah, who lived in the apartment. And I often remind people that what gets lost is that Janiyah's bedroom, where she was not that night because she was in California visiting friends, but if she had been home, more than likely Janiyah would have been a second victim because more bullets went into her bedroom than any other space in the house. She had bullets. In fact, one of my first direct conversations with Janiyah was she and I standing outside of her window. This is the first day that I'm meeting this family. We're standing outside of her window, and she is showing me and counting the number of bullets that went through the frame that was still, there was still marks there, even though they had covered, they had put in a new glass. And so this is the kind of trauma that we walked into meeting this family, no one paying attention to them, people, one ignoring them, but also lying, so many lies. And we know, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, all the lies from the warrant to the who's who and the covering up that was happening. They were wounded. But we found out that Breonna was such a beautiful soul that the family was committed to fighting for her the way that they know, one, she would have wanted, but also how she would have fought for them if the situation had been in a different direction.
Absolutely. And so, as the nation was grappling with COVID and, of course, what happened to Ahmaud and Scintilla Shores, we were introduced to this 28-year-old EMT, essential worker, paramedic, daughter,
Yeah.
partner, an independent Black woman who had been gunned down in her own apartment. And that's the part
Right.
that touched me the most in this situation, because as we've already stated, many times the women who have been unjustly killed by law enforcement, the names aren't amplified like the men's cases. I can think of a few: Sandra Bland and Pamela Turner, Turner, but
Yes.
not so much as needs to be. And so in this case, I think it was important. And I think one of the things that Until Freedom and others did was humanize Breonna Taylor. Kind of tell
Yeah.
us more about the human side of her.
Yeah. Well, and all, also, even to the strategy around how we would get the nation to focus on Breonna Taylor, because it's not that the local community wasn't fighting for her. They had been having protests. They had been shutting down bridges. They were doing all the things. And I mean, that lets you know there's an intentional sort of blacklisting, if you will, or blackout of Black women who've been killed in one of these unjust situations. There was no lack of people concerned, but yet no big national attention. And so I remember I had been just to kind of go back, we left the first weekend that we met her, which of course we were introduced to the family by attorney Ben Crump. He asked us to figure out what we could do. Now, as you've said already, this is the time of it's COVID. There's a pandemic happening. We're not even really allowed to travel. But we decided that Memorial Weekend, we're going to go down to Kentucky and try to help out. And so while we're there and we're kind of learning about all the efforts that's been happening on the ground, I'm thinking, what do we do about this beautiful sister and her boyfriend, Kenny Walker, who was inside the apartment that night as well and could have been killed? And so I'm thinking, what do we do? As we are leaving and we're strategizing, but we're going back to New York, we learn about George Floyd being murdered. And literally it happened, like the video was just going viral, and we were hearing, I don't watch those videos, but I could hear through the telephone of attorney Angelo Pinto, who's one of the co-founders of Until Freedom. I could hear the screams, and I looked at Angelo's face and I saw him visibly shaken, like he was emotional. And we were like, what is that? We decided we were going to leave there. Instead of going back to New York from Kentucky, we went to Minneapolis and joined the resistance movement there. Over the course of time, course of several days, I met George Floyd's family, and we asked them whether it would be okay for us to kind of marry the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor movement so that we could pick up some steam in terms of getting more attention to her. And they said not only yes, hook us up, send us the information. Of course, Ben was already thinking, Attorney Crump was already thinking of how he would tie these things together to show people it's from state to state, it's from the north side to the east side, it's all over the nation. And in terms of the brutality. And so they were like, yeah, do your thing. Like, we want to help. What can we do to also play a role? And that helped us to, as you said, humanize her, and also just to bring a spotlight to the fact that, we're not going to skip over this Black woman. We're going to tell her story. And by the way, the LMPD, the Louisville Metro Police Department, they were doing everything that they could to make Breonna Taylor out to be a drug dealer, a drug mule. I mean, the arguments that I was having with friends and family members who, as we know, pick this crazy stuff up that they hear online, and it becomes a part of their daily conversation. They were telling me, well, she had drugs in her house. There were no drugs in Breonna Taylor's house. The postmaster said he never, ever, ever, ever at all, made that accusation that there were suspicious packages going to her house. But these were all lies that had been told on Brianna. So it took a lot of work for us to strategically, through conversations, through marketing, through getting many celebrities involved. Thank God for Rhapsody and Alicia Keys, who the three of us got on the phone and figured out, like, what can we do? And we brought in everybody from Jada Pinkett to Cardi B to Ellen DeGeneres, helped us to really show that Breonna Taylor was a human being, and this is a woman who was shot to death in her house for no reason at all. But it took all of that work in order to as you said, humanize her, but also to illuminate an injustice that was clearly being ignored and being suppressed.
Absolutely.
So
And Keandra, why do you think it was so important that we needed to humanize this woman who had been subject to state-sanctioned violence?
I think that since this country's inception, I think it goes all the way back to slavery. They have been conditioned to not see us as human, period. And I think
That's
that
right.
it's a trickle down effect of their way of thinking. They just don't see us as human. I have seen people give more grace and more energy to a white person's pet, literally a puppy dog, more than
Right.
they gave to the Black person impacted by that white person. And I'm not exaggerating. And so I think it's important to humanize us. Not, I mean, we don't have a choice. They don't see us as human. That's just necessary work. Like while you're talking to Mika, and I want to stop and say, I appreciate you and I respect you so much for what you do.
Thank you,
So much for
Candy.
what you do. And
Thank you, sis.
I'm sitting here listening to you and you're describing, like, because I know I'm a rookie in it, but just I know how I don't want to say overwhelming, but I know how heavy it can be because the job you do, you're essentially being a voice for someone whose voice has been stolen. So I wanted to also, for one, point out the fact that I think people skip over that even if she were a drug dealer, that's not even an offense that's punishable by death. So
Mm,
that itself,
mm,
my experience in marketing, I know that's a psychological thing to strip her of any empathy that she's owed. Because even
mhm.
if she was selling drugs, even if there was suspicious packages, that's not something that in this country legally you are given a death sentence for. So why did she receive one without due
Wow.
process? And I also wanted to just ask you,
That's a
Tamika,
powerful
um,
point. A very powerful point.
and we get so caught up in defending her,
Mm,
that we don't even me, I'm like, you know what? That's not something she even, that's not something that's punishable by death, even if she was guilty. But I do believe that's just a way of them stripping her of empathy as they do Black people, Black victims, Black women,
right.
especially. And I wanted to talk to you, or just ask you if you could talk a little bit about not just humanizing the victim, because that's necessary because they dehumanize us. We have to push back. But I also want to talk to you about what that's like to have a victim who you're advocating for while people are so actively trying to vilify them, because I
Hmm.
haven't experienced that.
Hmm. Well, I'm used to the media doing it. I mean, I've been in this work for over 30 years now. So I've watched them villainize Everybody, the leaders, the victim, the parents, the everybody except the perpetrator, right?
Yeah.
I've watched it, and it's much I can say about that. And Griggs, we've been down that road, right? And
Yes.
so, I'm not. That doesn't bother me. What does impact me? What does hurt? I'm going to use the word hurt, is when we participate in it, right? People who won't go get the right information,
Hmm.
people who believe that if the white person said it, if the white man said it, or the white media said it, then it has to be true. I had someone very close to me one day say, well, I saw it on the news, and you're not in the news. You're not on the news. So, like, like, in other words, to say that I would automatically be disqualified from knowing the truth because I'm not on television. I'm hoping that as we see the world and all the crazy things that's happening, that we are now, our eyes are more open to how the media lies, like, just terribly. I mean, just watching a million things, I could bring up all types of examples, but I won't. But there have been so many situations in the last several years, and I'm talking Biden administration as well, where you just know that it's a lie. It's a flat
Hmm.
out lie, the story they're telling on the media, in the media. And I hope that other people are beginning to see why it's important to be tapped into shows like yours, my podcast with my son, the TMI show, and other individuals who are out here trying to fill that gap, that void for real information, for truth, right? And for some common damn sense. Because sometimes the stuff that I listen to, I'm just like, wow, like, we're not even using the common sense that God gave us. And so that's really hard, because that's where I have my biggest fight. My fight against the system is what it is, and it is a continuum. It's not that I think all of a sudden today, I'm showing up as this person that's going to make the change of a lifetime. And if I am, I'll get my what's the thing Trump wants so bad?
Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get my Nobel Peace Prize, and that'll be great. But that's neat. That's not what I know to be the case, because we are in a lifelong struggle. What is frustrating is having to argue with my cousin, who's supposed to know better, that just because you heard that on the 4 o'clock news does not mean that you go put it on your Instagram page. I will never forget, during the whole, Black Lives Matter, and they stole everything and all, they had made up these thousands and thousands of lies and stories, and everybody was against Black Lives Matter. And I remember some brothers who are in the movement. I remember seeing them post things about the leaders of BLM at the time. And I asked them, like, where did you get this stuff from? And these are people, some of them follow Minister Farrakhan, who's a person who we know has been villainized and stories have been told about him. Some of them follow other leaders that have gone through the same thing. They're, been disparaged and discredited. And I asked them, where did you get this information from? And they're like, oh, yeah, I saw it was online. It was here, it was there. They didn't even take the time to find out if what they were saying was true. And by the time we went through the list of accusations, it was kind of like, so what's the point, and why are you sharing this? Because you got 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people following you. So for me, when you ask that question, what's the hardest, the biggest challenge, is getting us on board. And it's also getting us to abandon this idea that, well, it didn't happen to anybody in my family, so therefore it has
Hmm.
nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Abs-
So you,
Absolutely. Yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead.
So you hit on a little bit one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because as an activist myself, my primary tool is social media. I'm not
Mm.
necessarily organizing in the streets, I organize online. And you said that you've been doing this so long, like 30 years, right? Correct. So my
More than
question
30, honey. More than 30. More than 30.
so my question for you would be, I know how I've seen media change just in the past 5 years. I would just like to hear you talk about how social media has shaped and changed activism, because I've seen how one lie, one link, one person with access to Canva and internet can
Dangerous.
post something and it goes viral to where large media outlets are picking it up. So I just want to hear your perspective on that and how it's affected your work as an activist.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. And I'm going to answer the question in a different way. I'm going to say to you, you said you organize online, that's your major tool. The best tool that you have for organizing is your 2 feet, right? We believe, right? Because when we were in Kentucky, we first got there, again, the local folks there, these are my people, right? We had some bumps and bruises in the beginning, but now we go to Kentucky, we good in any hood. They love us. We build together there for the most part. That's the way I think. And when we first got there, it was like, okay, there's a lot happening. Again, these people, they had abandoned their lives, Keandria. They had left their homes and moved into a park so that they could hold space for Breonna every day. They were refusing to go home. They had a camp that they were in, fighting every single day, all day long for this woman. People with families, because of course during COVID, you got people out of work, whatever. They were living there. Still no national attention. So what do you do about this? Every day at 12 o'clock, we marched. We walk out, we go to the park. They, sing this, that, sometimes fight. Just depends on what's going on in the movement on any given day. Because you got debate, you got who this, that, all the things, regular people things. That's another thing that people need to stop thinking, that in our movements, there's not conflict, because there's always conflict, right? And so we go through all the stuff. And then at 12 o'clock, everybody would be unified and get in the streets and start walking to whatever the target of the day is. We did this for a while, and I noticed it was just like a group of Black people leading a bunch of white people. And I'm like, something is wrong with this picture, because we're posting the stuff. Every one of the celebrities that I mentioned to you is sharing it. They're following us. They like, go, you march with them. They're doing their own videos. Alicia Keys done turned her social media basically into an Until Freedom shadow account, because she's sharing everything. They're out there 12 o'clock every day. This is the street. This is where they're going to be. But the white people were the ones showing up. And I said, the posting is not enough. We have to take the time to also go knock on the doors in the Black community and make sure that our people know we're on the ground, that they know that there's a 12 o'clock meetup, because they're not going to sit on Instagram and wait to see, or Facebook and wait to get the flyers. They don't have time for that. People trying to figure out how they're going to survive. And we went and we started knocking on doors. And by the next day, we started to do this every Thursday. Shout out to my brother, Reverend Stephen Green, who created Good Trouble Thursdays. No, Good Trouble Tuesdays, excuse me. And we would go out and knock on doors. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, people started showing up. You could tell the crowd was changing, because the direct connection between us and our community is the most important form of activism and organizing that you can have. And that's what we did. Now, I'll tell you this, and Griggs, once we started walking the streets and knocking on the doors, we found out people were hungry. Grocery store had been closed in the community. We thank God for our brother Trey the Truth, who immediately called a friend, and they started bringing food in. We fed 4,000 families, because once you get out there and you start organizing with your people, and it's beyond that screen that is keeping us away from one another, you'll find out what the community really needs. It's not that they don't care about what happened to Breonna Taylor, but they're trying not to be the next Breonna Taylor. They're trying not to have their communities, disrespected in the same way. They really, and they don't have the resources, because this is during the pandemic. Once we got with the Urban League and we started working with other organizations, there was an immediate increase in the amount of people who came out and to support and to be out there to fight for Breonna Taylor. So that brings me quickly back to your your point about what social media has done. Social media helps. It's a very important tool. A very important tool. Thank God that we can get our message out everywhere, and and share as much and as far and as wide as possible. But what was even more advantageous in terms of what we were building on the ground was the human interaction. So what I would say is that any activist who's out there, people just starting out, even people who've been doing it for a while, trying to figure out like what's next, balance, balance out the two. Don't spend all your time in one place, and we need to use the tools so we don't have to walk as much, right? Like, so we can
Mhm.
get the information out as much as possible. So that's what we do at Until Freedom. Our model is that when we go into any community, we dare not think that because we posted it and because I may have a large following that everybody's going to see it, because we know the algorithm is racist in and of itself, that it won't even allow us to get our message out there properly.
Absolutely. And I just thinking of all the things you're saying, it just brings us back to what they did in the previous movement and how we have been impactful in this movement by doing exactly what you said. And one of the things I wanted to kind of focus us on as we transition into the no knock search warrant and the botched raid was, and this is the first time I had seen this in the movement, but I had seen it previously in the civil rights movement. Can we talk a little bit about Breonna Con? Because I mean, that's when I
Mm.
actually made it to the ground, and I had never seen like a festival, a social justice festival that was focused on mobilizing towards a case. So, can you kind of
Mhm.
talk about that portion of the campaign for justice for Breonna Taylor?
Yeah, it's interesting because there were some writers, particularly a Black woman who was writing at the time for Washington Post, who wrote a terrible story against Until Freedom, myself, and the organizers of Brianna Khan. That was that was a development. Again, we're thinking of strategic ways to get attention to this situation and to bring more attention to the work of the local community, and we had multiple Airbnbs around the city. For people who may not know, we lived in Kentucky because after going back and forth, we were getting accosted by the whoever those people were that they had in the airports that stopped you. Remember during that time when you tried to travel during the pandemic, they would get you and to sign a paper and then you're not allowed to go back on the plane and you had to go quarantine, and it was just craziness. And so we made the decision that there was no way we could keep popping back and forth to Kentucky, that we were going to just just stay, move in. And so we said 30 days. We ended up living there for a little more than 4 months. And we had multiple Airbnbs around the city where we were housing activists from around the country. And, and thank God for all the people who donated and supported, because we kept every house paid for, every house stocked up, and people were staying there. So the house that we lived in, the four co-founders of Until Freedom, that was the strategy house. Everybody was there. Brianna's family was there almost every day. It's a place where we did interviews. All the activists, the local, the national people met there. And so one night we were sitting up late trying to think, what's the next thing we can do? Because we're marching. Everybody knows we're marching. That's not like, special at this time. People are getting arrested. All this stuff is happening. Still, we need more national media. We need more stories in all the top media. And so we said, we need to do like a conference, because the other thing was that at the center of of this whole scenario, what played out with Brianna, as has been mentioned, was the no knock warrants. And so there was a sister by the name of Katora Haran, who is now, she's a state legislator. She at the time was working for ACLU, I think. I'm pretty sure ACLU local in Kentucky. And Katora, dope sister, was trying to get legislation passed to end no knock warrants. there in Kentucky, in the state, and of course, some local legislation, local, which would have been in the city. And so this was an effort that she was working on. And a lot of people did not even know what a no-knock warrant is. It's sort of like stand your ground in Georgia. People are like, what? Like in Florida, what do you mean stand your ground? This is after the body is laid out. Now we're finding out that there are laws that actually protect people and allow this stuff to happen. And so everybody's like, no-knock warrants. What do we do about that? And thank God this Black woman, Katora, had already started working on legislation. So what we wanted to do with Breonna was to put on a conference that allowed people to have various entry points to the conversation. Of course, there was the legal side. Of course, folks not understanding why the local attorney did not, the local law enforcement agencies did not do their own investigation and indictment of the officers. People didn't understand that. They didn't understand that Tim Wine, who was, I think, what was he? The Commonwealth attorney. Is that right, Griggs? The
I
Commonwealth
think so.
attorney.
It's sort of like a district attorney.
He's like a district
Yes.
attorney, but they call it right in New York. New York, we would say district attorney, but he was the Commonwealth attorney. He recused himself, and God rest his soul, he passed away, but he recused himself from the case, which was unfortunate because it should have stayed right there where he would have got the indictments. But that's how Daniel Cameron, the attorney general, got involved, because once the local law enforcement recused themselves from the case, it left the state level. And by the way, Daniel Cameron, if you watch any of his videos prior to 2020, he said he was for the cops 100%. He was a police guy, that he was going to do everything possible to protect police. He had every single fraternal order, union, every single one of them, all the different departments, they all supported him. They all gave him money. So you already know what he was going to do and where he was going to lean into protecting the officers. Lord, I'm talking so much, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Why? Oh, Breonna Taylor.
We're talking about Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, so that was an aspect of what people needed to know also, because folks were asking us, when did he even run for office? I didn't even, so many of our people, sometimes they just not engaged in the process. So they didn't even know. They were like, when does he run again? Because we need to find a way to make sure that this guy does not get reelected. So we said, that's an aspect. There's community organizations that folks didn't know they could go to support. And we said, we're going to put it all together. And the young people which was Breonna's sister, as well as some of the other young people who were with us, with Breonna's family, said, you know what? Let's call it BreonnaCon. So we said, great. I get it. They wanted to be focused on Breonna, but they wanted it to have many different aspects of what's happening in the community dealing with policing and so on and so forth. And so we did BreonnaCon. It was well attended. Lots of people supported. We had all types of events. We had barbecues. From the legislative day to the community aspect, we fed people. It was just a full weekend of activities. And for the most part, especially people who were there, who got to feel and see it, it was, people really appreciated it in the community. However, there were some people nationally who said that we were somehow exploiting Breonna by holding the conference. So, it is what it is.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
always
And
say
just
stuff like that.
just to be clear, when people say that, because there was a narrative that they tried that Until Freedom came in and we pretty much exploited Breonna for money. So just to be clear, during that time, we raised about.
Looks like we had some audio difficulties. But I think what she was talking about is they raised money and the money went back to the community and went to the implementation of it. You're having some audio issues, Tamika? Okay, maybe if you log out and log back in. But basically, what she was talking about is how the activists on the ground were pouring back in and using novel ideas that had not been done since the previous movement. Many times when you have a campaign, especially a campaign that is focused in that community, you have to have other actions that push forward the conversation to galvanize continued attention. And that's what she was talking about. But let's kind of shift while she's dealing with the technical issues to the key important facts about the case. So back in March of 2020, what you saw was a police execute a warrant that occurred at Breonna Taylor's home. They used a battering ram, and her boyfriend and Breonna were present in the home when they executed this warrant. Her boyfriend was there. They heard banging at the door. Police never identified themselves, and then they battle rammed the door in, and that's when her boyfriend Kenneth Walker fired a defensive shot, causing the police to fire multiple shots into the location, and it was crazy.
Just
Breonna was
so
of course unarmed, and Tamika is back. So we were just kind of
Sorry.
talking about. I know you had some technical difficulties. We were talking about shifting towards what happened that evening. If you could kind of pick up and help me in the parts that I think I missed, but
Yeah.
basically there was a no-knock warrant. Kenneth Walker fired a defensive shot because the police never identified themselves, and then they unloaded into the house.
so
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just want to jump in real quick to be clear because I feel like this, not just the timeline, but the people who are involved. I want to be clear because I didn't know that detail until we discussed it. So the boyfriend who's fired the shot is not the person that they were even looking for. So this guy that they're claiming they're hunting down and banging down and knocking down her door and shooting into her apartment, the whole time, this is not even an accurate address for this person, correct?
Right. And also let's be clear. Um they were not looking for the guy who you're speaking about. They were not
Okay.
looking for him. They were
Okay.
there because they claimed that they believed there may have been suspicious packages in the house. They were
Gotcha.
literally there to look to search the house for what they
A
thought
drug
would have been
raid,
there,
not a
drugs,
person.
money, or whatever.
Got you.
Exactly. And even that, I mean, if we had time, there should be a 5 hour special to uncover all the lies. Because the thing that I want to make sure we don't get off of here without saying is that um they and later on, what we end up finding out when one of the officers, the female officer, when she is about to deliver her child, she comes forth and wants to cut a deal for herself. And so she begins to tell, I don't know, I wouldn't even call her a whistleblower. I like to give whistleblowers a lot more respect because she was there and she was down for I don't know if y'all curse on y'all show, but we do on ours. So she
Feel
was with
free.
the shits. Yeah, she was with the shits. But when it was time for her to deliver her baby, she got concerned about going to jail for a long time. And so she came forward to tell her story. And that's good. I'm sure if Brianna's family was here, they would say, we appreciate her for telling the truth. They met the officers who were involved. They all met in a garage and created a story about what took place that night. They all came together and she puts them, the individuals, the shooters, and all those officers in this garage and tells the story about what they decided. One of the things that they intended to do, or that they left there intending to do, which they did, which was to ensure that they muddied Breonna Taylor's name. So they created a story that they all agreed upon, and they all decided that when they left there, they would be lockstep and key with that story, including trying to destroy Breonna in order to make it make sense for why they went into her house the way that they did. And then, Griggs, when you said fill in the gaps, let's also be clear that there are multiple people in the apartment complex who are saying they heard banging, but they did not hear yelling. They did not hear police open up. They didn't hear anything. And now, let me tell you, I don't know about y'all, but Breonna Taylor and Kenny Walker are in the bed in their house. They hear a bunch of banging on the door. Now, common sense again tells me that if I heard bang, 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 police, police, bang, 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 police, police, right? I'm going to the door a lot more understanding of what is taking place here. Like, okay, I don't know why
Hmm.
I might open the door and say, the hell is wrong with y'all banging on my door like this? But at least I have an idea of who's on the other side. The only thing that would make Kenny Walker and Breonna feel uncomfortable about opening the door is if they did not hear who was banging on the other side. That's just a
Right.
common sense concept that if I
Right.
hear bang, 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 police, bang, bang, bang. Now, again, I might show up at the door and open it like y'all MFs got to be out your damn mind that you're knocking on my door like this. But the fact that they were unwilling to open the door, they were nervous, and Kenny felt the need to fire a warning shot at the police. Now, Griggs, you you're the lawyer here. You're telling me that he's going to shoot not at the police, he shot at the ground, but regardless, that he would open fire knowing for sure, because he's heard them as many times as they claim on the other side saying that they were police officers. And meanwhile, in the building, other people are saying they never heard police, they never heard an announcement of who was there. So it would make sense that the common sense concept of what went on inside the apartment and the people who are corroborating that with their stories outside, it all goes together. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Y'all did not announce yourselves when knocking on this woman's door.
And here's how you know
Terrifying.
they didn't announce themselves. If they were going to announce themselves, they wouldn't have needed a no-knock warrant. And
There's
that
the point.
is the crux of why it was important for y'all to amplify the call to ban the no-knock warrants. And so I just want to give people who don't know more of the facts. Of course, Breonna was unarmed. She was shot and killed, and the officers involved were Jonathan Mattingly, Miles Cosgrove, Brett Hankerson, the female officer that you talked about. And again, this is the first time I heard about this particular female officer coming forward and giving more details as to the narrative that the police would put out there. But now it makes sense as to why, even in the narrative they put out there, it didn't make sense at all, because it had been agreed upon after the fact as to how they were going to move. So thank you for lifting that up for everybody to know. Keandra, I know the average citizen would not know what to do in a situation like that. Can you talk about the fear and the
Mm.
reality of potentially being Black and having somebody try to kick in your door, and what would go in your mind as that is happening?
I'm sitting here thinking about the fact that it's at nighttime and, like you said, they're in the bed. I know me personally, I always wake up a little disoriented, a little paranoid. I have to remind myself, okay, I'm at home. Everything's fine. It doesn't even matter what it is. So I couldn't imagine somebody banging down my door. I'm going straight into defense mode. And I think that that reaction is a normal human reaction. As humans, we have this innate need to protect ourselves. And we go into fight or flight essentially when we are afraid or if we feel threatened, we go into this fight or flight mode. And I feel like that's how they responded, especially if they were just now waking up. But it all goes back to the fact that they don't see us as human. She
That's
wasn't
right.
allowed to be human. She wasn't allowed to be scared. She wasn't allowed to react in a way that a normal human, when you say common sense, Tamika, you're talking about humans who have common sense and they don't see us as human. And they did everything to make sure that people didn't see Brianna as human.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, and I think the next part of the common sense is I off. Okay, there we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think the other part of the common sense is they didn't have anything in the apartment. Now, if you went in and you found the drugs, the money, and all the things in the little black book, right? Then we could say, yeah, you knew who was knocking on the door, but you chose not to open it, right? But they didn't have anything. So now there it further helps us to make the point that there's no reason why they would not have opened the door if they knew exactly who was there. Now, by the way, you want to go into Breonna Taylor's house. They had been there watching her go back and forth to work. They knew the time that she was leaving in the morning and the daytime. They knew when Kenny was coming in and out. So why not walk up on her when she's coming out of her apartment one day and then and
Ask
say, we
her.
going back in here? Is anybody in here? Is, we're going in here to search your apartment because we have a warrant. What is the reason for going to someone's house in the middle of the night? I guess it was around 12 o'clock at night. Why would you do that? But see, the part of the story that is a conspiracy to some, but it's not a conspiracy to us because we know how corrupt these officers are. And by the way, you just got to hold in one hand that they lied and said the postmaster told them that there was suspicious packages going to the apartment. And we know the postmaster said never came up, never made a report. And in fact, he didn't actually believe that. So that didn't happen. The community says, and I believe them, because by the time we got there, when we hit the ground, Keandria, everybody knew exactly what happened. The people, all you needed to do was go downtown and ask Pookie what happened, and they could tell you the whole story. And it ended up being that almost every single detail of what people knew from the beginning is exactly what was uncovered later. And the reason why they knew is because this has been happening in that particular community where they are attempting to gentrify that neighborhood. And so this is a terrorism tactic, right? This is all about, first of all, breaking in people's houses, stealing things, money, maybe, or whatever else they may be able to get their hands on, and also making the community feel uncomfortable so that they can clear out that area and begin to build. Now, again, some people may say that's a conspiracy, but the thing is, the community was very clear. They want our apartments. We know what they're doing. They're criminalizing us. We're experiencing these same types of activities, this illegal policing on a regular basis. The community had been militarized because they knew old boy wasn't there. They knew he wasn't there. They knew he wasn't there because she had an actual boyfriend who was sort of like, in and out living with her. He had his own apartment, but he was there. You know how it goes. You with me every night. That's how it goes. So it just what happened to Breonna Taylor is probably one of the worst police intentional botch ups or whatever you want to call it. It's just disgusting. And I have so much more that I could share about all of the things from the warrants to what happened with Daniel Cameron and when he came forward to say that the indictment would only be for wanton endangerment. I know that word. I learned that on the spot. Like, what the hell is wanton endangerment? It was for the bullet that went through the wall next door that could have harmed somebody. It wasn't even for the woman who was actually dead from this situation. And when learning more about that, what we heard from the jurors was that they were so upset. At least 4 of them came forward and said they were so upset because they thought that they were going to hear a case that was about the killing of Breonna Taylor. They wanted to indict on that. It was never presented to them. It was never presented to them, which is, something else for a different day on your show to talk about the standards for intent to murder. Basically, on a federal level, it's extremely high, unreasonable, and it allows these officers in so many instances to get away with murder because it's not a fair and equitable system. And so, Daniel Cameron was kind of able to fall under that, but he lied. He lied to Breonna Taylor's family. In fact, when they called Tamika Palmer to tell her that the grand jury had concluded and that she could come to Frankfurt, which is their capital, to get the update, the lawyers, attorney Sam Aguiar and attorney Lanita Baker, they said, listen, do not make this woman drive an hour plus from Louisville to go to Frankfurt to hear that there's no indictment. She can deal with that on the phone. If that's the case, let her hear it on the phone. They said, no, she should come. So, of course, if we tell you, don't have me come here for some bullshit, and you tell me, no, you should still come, there must be hope, right? That this is because you wouldn't dare have a mother drive an hour to tell us that there's nothing. Well, that's exactly what he did. He lied. He stood with Tamika Palmer and told her there was no indictment, and he said that the jury did not find basically wrongdoing. I don't know the proper terminology, but the jury did not indict on behalf of Breonna. No, what he should have said was that we did not present a case for the murder of Breonna Taylor.
So
I
he
mean,
passed
it's
the buck like the jurors had decided that.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So basically, a prosecutor has the ability to present the case that they want the jury to grant, the grand jury to indict. What he did was a shell game. He presented the case with regard to the bullets that went into the other apartments and never presented a murder case on behalf of the officers for the victim, Breonna Taylor. And so that was one of those things that as I was watching all this go down, it just went through my mind as to, oh, so this particular prosecutor is playing in our face. He's thinking that we won't, get the actual evidence from the grand jurors once
That's
they are
right.
released to talk about what happened in the grand jury, which of course you guys were able to do that. I want
Exactly.
to
Well, we
talk.
did a lot to we knuckled Daniel Cameron's
That's what
ass
I
up
want to
and
go to.
sent.
I want to talk
Yeah.
about the multiple actions that happened on Daniel Cameron's lawn. So can we
Mhm.
shift to that and have that conversation?
Yeah, well, we did. It was really one big action on his lawn, but we did all types of other things. So yeah, yeah, we held a protest on his front lawn in which we were charged with felonies. No one was harmed, no one was home. Nevertheless, they definitely tried to give us felonies. I think that he had, well, I don't think, I know for sure that he had he had aspirations to become governor. And so I'm sure that in some conversations they said there must have been, how many of us? I think it was 67. It was 67 of
67.
us. Yeah, it was 67 of us because it's the 67 and the 55. So 67 was a large number of people to put felonies on and then try to run for governor, right? So they dropped those through the work of Attorney Baker, Lanita, and Sam, and all the other attorneys that got involved. They dropped the felonies, but we still had charges to fight, and there was like a real situation in terms of like these protests. And I think people believe, I've heard so many times, oh, they're paid protesters. Oh, we were facing real charges, right? And you know, the mere fact that Daniel Cameron thought that he was going to disrespect Breonna's family, be an obstructionist to justice, do all these things, and he was still going to run for governor, he's out of his damn mind. We said, no way. You don't get promoted and celebrated for what you have done to this Black woman. We said, no, we got something for you. So I promised him. I said it. I'm sure Daniel Cameron, he probably really truly dislikes me. I remember in an article, they asked him about my comments that we will not forget and we will be on your ass. And they asked him, and he said, I'm not worried about that. The people of Kentucky are going to be with me. And you know what we did? We got real quiet, Kendra. We ain't said a word. We opened the office quietly in Kentucky. We went in there and kept it quiet. We organized. We organized block by block. And when he announced, and then his election came up, we whooped him, sent him right on back to wherever. He didn't even have a job as attorney general anymore. Now, though, hey, this is a whole different, man. Y'all got me on here tonight, and I could talk about so much, but these people, what they do is they go home, they brush themselves off, they get their thing together, and then they reincarnate. They show up again,
Hmm.
like everybody's supposed to forget. So I heard that 2 weeks ago he was at the bishops meeting, which is the Black clergy there in Louisville hosting a meeting with community. And for whatever reason, he was allowed to be there and to be comfortable. we just don't, I don't know what happens to us that we can't hold the damn line. Daniel Cameron should have to go be with his MAGA friends and stay there. He should never, ever, ever, unless he's willing to come and repent out of his mouth and say that what I did was wrong. And I know that I need to make good with my community. And then there needs to be a process for reconciliation. But instead, he's already walking around trying to, to get the relationships reestablished with the Black church and with other community people. Now, thankfully, I saw a bunch of folks online saying hell to the no, because we already know what he's doing. It's not that he cares about the community. He's setting himself up to run for office again. And Mitch McConnell, this is his last year, right? I
Yeah,
think.
and that's exactly what he's setting himself up to run for Senate. But as you say, we don't forget,
Oh
and
no.
so we will, again organize again.
That's
But
right.
what I want to kind of shift us into this conversation, because yes, we could be on here for a while, and I would love to hear all of it. So nothing's off limits on this podcast. This is the Justice for series. We want to talk about justice and how we get there. But my question is, once y'all got past all of the shenanigans that they tried to put initially, at some point we got to some semblance of they were going to be indicted, both from the state and federal. How did that shift? I know Daniel Cameron had some to deal with that, but just recently there was an announcement by the Justice Department on the other charges. What happened with that?
My God, Griggs. I cannot stay on here all night with y'all because you're trying to open up all the different bags. It's bringing back so much. And I've cried so many days about this case that it feels good to be able to get it all out and just to really talk about the different aspects, because what this family has endured has really been horrific. So the reason why there were charges at all is because a Black woman named Kristen Clark was over the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. So when people tell you, Keandria, as you about your life, and you know how some of our people love to say, my vote don't count,
Mm-hmm.
Biden and Kamala and Biden was the same thing as Trump, and it's not the
Mm-hmm.
same. It's not the same, because we have a Department of Justice right now that even with indictments that a grand jury put forth. So the people, this is not the feds just came in and said, oh, we're going to find a case against you and we don't know whether or not it's justified, right? We know that this went through a rigorous process to get the people to indict these officers, and now we have a Department of Justice that has rolled that back, or Griggs, you give me the right terminology, but basically
They,
they
they
dropped
have
the
dismissed
charges.
with prejudice
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
charges.
Right. They've dismissed the charges. The other administration, the one that they say is all the same, that administration under the Black woman Kristen Clark's Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, she brought charges against these officers, and she would have done more if the law allowed, but she followed the law. And so, because one could say, well, why didn't she find these officers or try to have them indicted for murder and all of that? Well, the statute is the statute and the standard is the standard. And so she followed the law, down to the pen. And therefore, whatever she was able to indict for, that's what they did. And these officers, they are guilty, and they're guilty of even more than what they were supposed to face time for. You have one officer, Mattingly, who is, I'm glad you put that up so I can make sure that I see, or maybe it's Brett Hankinson. He is supposed to be in prison right now, but he's out on appeal waiting for the federal government to decide whether or not his case, he will actually face time that he was found guilty of with the jury of his peers, and the judge sentenced him. And now he's they had him released from jail until pending the appeal. So this is the type of stuff that we're dealing with, right? That the system, no matter how many ways you go around to try to get a slither of justice, there are all these levers that allow justice to be denied. And for even the little bit that you've done, the little bit you've accomplished, to be rolled back. So now, yes, unfortunately, these officers who were supposed to face trial, their charges have been dismissed by the Trump administration, and it's unfortunate because you have to call it the Trump DOJ. That's what you have to call it, because this is not a normal system of power, levels of power. You can't say that in this moment that the Department of Justice is a what do you call it, independent agency. It is clear that Trump is literally running the Department of Justice as if it is his local, in his house, where he can just tell you, go arrest this one, drop these charges. That is actually not how it is supposed to operate. Am I right, Griggs? Like,
That's exactly how it's not supposed to operate. It's supposed to be an independent investigatory and legal arm of the federal government, not the president's law firm. And so, kind of want to break that apart. So, as you said, Brett Hankerson was the only one indicted by a federal grand jury. He was sentenced to 33 months in prison and now is out on an appeal bond while they take up the sentence and the conviction. So, what I want people to know about this, and I'm glad you brought up former Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clarke, because she is also instrumental in bringing the charges down in Scintilla Shores on the federal government, getting the conviction of the 3 individuals that were party to killing Ahmaud Arbery. But for the presence of a strong civil rights division of the Department of Justice, none of these cases would have gotten any semblance of accountability, whether that's George Floyd, whether that's Ahmaud Arbery, and whether that's Breonna Taylor. But I think what we want the people to understand, and Tamika, you have lifted this up so eloquently, is that this particular iteration of the Justice Department is doing the exact opposite of what a civil rights division should do. They should follow the facts and follow the law, and they should not be the ones implementing the defense for a criminal defendant or trying to run interference in the criminal process. That's for his defense attorneys to do. And
Absolutely.
So I just want people to understand that, but for the work that y'all did on the ground, giving the people a voice, they would have never gotten the indictments or the conviction. And now we got a federal government that's trying to do everything in its power to reverse that. Keandra, it looked like you wanted to say something.
I was just listening to you and thinking about it, like how, to me, okay, so I'm just gonna say it. I'm not one to mince words. She keeps saying common sense. When you mentioned people saying like, oh, Kamala and Biden, they would have been the same thing as bullshit. We can see it. One thing you're not gonna do is gaslight me. I hate when people try to gaslight me. It makes me so mad. And there's so much gaslighting happening right now. You can see a clear-cut difference. Like you said, those cases would not have gotten any semblance of justice under the Trump administration or the way it's operating now. So that's just when you saw the emotions playing out on my face. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, we can see it. We can see the clear-cut difference. The people who don't see it are being willfully ignorant, or they're burying their heads in the sand. And it's not just MAGA. And I think we need to be particular about that, because there are a whole lot of people, especially white leftists, white liberals, white progressives, that claim that they want justice, and they claim that they are anti-racism, but they are so quick. They are so quick to jump on those bandwagons, so quick to throw common sense out of the window. And I personally feel like they have been just as damaging.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you 100% that there are a lot of people, a lot of actors, bad actors in these scenarios that allow us to have a Trump, right? I don't think that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are saviors. I don't think that under Kamala Harris, Black people's issues would be solved. I don't think any of that. And, I'm one who's called them out. I've had hard conversations, with people at all different levels of the Democratic. So that we would have absolutely been in a better place, and Black people would have been, all of our problems would have been solved under Kamala Harris. What I will tell you is that we fought for a Kristen Clarke to take her position, to be in that role. That's work that happened with people toiling and demanding of Joe Biden that he appoint her. By the way, let's be clear. This is not because they don't mind appointing a white man. They do that all day long, right? We're the ones who said, in order for us to support your presidency or to support you becoming president, we want a black head of civil rights division. We want a black Supreme Court justice, which is how you get a Ketanji Brown. We want a black vice president. We want black women in some of these roles. I mean, these are things, these were demands, these were conditions. So, and again, when people say, well, we just giving it away for free, well, maybe you are. And maybe everybody around you, but I know I'm a part of people who actually organize. I'm not saying it's perfect, but there's real work that goes on. And so Kristen Clark does not become the assistant attorney general by accident. It's intentional, and we know her. We know where she comes from. We know that she has a strong civil rights background, that she was doing the work already, even before becoming assistant attorney general. So, it is common sense again. And a lot of people, they are, as you said, woefully ignorant. Some people really just are ignorant. I had a brother tell me a couple of days ago that, he's with Trump because Trump just be trolling. But we had war.
He's a president.
There's a war. There's war everywhere around us. Black women don't have jobs. Too many of us, almost 1 million Black women are out of work. And now they're saying that Black men are the fastest growing next group losing work and being pushed out of the workforce, right? That's a war. It's a war on Black people, because when they said anti-DEI, I don't give a damn what the data shows you. The data says that white women and Latino people of Latino descent, that they were the ones who benefited the most. That I'm sure the data says that, and I agree with it, because anything that's supposed to be about us, everybody else benefits. So we know that. But what we know is that when they said anti-DEI, no more DEI, cancel DEI. DEI is now a form almost criminalized. When they said that, they meant get rid of the Black people. And we know that it's happening in large numbers where people are actually really suffering. I'm hearing every single day from a friend, a family member, or someone who, I'm associated with, that they're losing their jobs. They're being terminated. A girlfriend of mine worked for a company for 13 years. They fired her and 4 other Black women at the same time, Greg. They were all standing in the lobby. They had their computers shut down and had to get out of a building after 13 years, no infractions, always on time, doing her work. Even the people that she was serving, she was in an administrative position, serving multiple individuals. They were like, why were y'all fired? They didn't even know. They had no idea why this happened. So this is the type of stuff that's going on out here. And you got people who are walking around talking about Trump. They think Trump is funny. Okay. I don't think it's funny at all. I don't think it's funny that so many of the organizations that I work with, their funding has been cut, their budgets have been cut. I don't think it's funny that people do not know how they are going to survive. I don't think it's funny that we're playing around with other nations that have the ability to really harm us as a people here. We don't got bunkers. We live in every day, walking around, taking trains, dealing with cyber issues every single day. I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's great. It's funny at all that that medical coverage is being cut, that help for addiction prevention has been cut, that some of the organizations that do gun violence prevention, their budgets have been cut by $2 and $3 million. Like, this is real stuff. And all I can say, yes, under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, issues still existed. But one thing I know is we didn't have an unemployment rate at this level during that administration. And if for some reason we did, at least somebody over there would have addressed it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I want to.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
What I was going to say is I echo everything you're saying. And I just want to lift up Kristen Clark, who's a good friend of mine, who is now the general counsel for the NAACP.
Yes.
Many difficult conversations about civil rights, whether it's what's happening at the Fulton County Jail or what's happening down in Centilla Shores. That is what it means to make sure that you have accountability for your vote. And so for the people that are on I call it Al Gore's internet or Beyonce's internet with all these conspiracy theories about your vote doesn't matter and all these other things. Listen, if your vote didn't matter, Trump would be
They
trying
wouldn't
to
be
pass
trying
the
to
SANE
take it
Act
away.
and take it away from you. And so,
Absolutely.
but what I want to kind of tie into all of this is the activism that led to 2020 started from Louisville, started in Minneapolis, of course, started in Centilla Shores. So as we kind of move to wrap this up, what do you see as next? I know that the Trump administration is basically trying to close the door on civil rights by dismissing the cases against these officers. But Tamika, what do you see as next in our movement and in the justice for that we can point people toward to make sure they understand that there is a clarion call to action and how they can get engaged?
So I think that local politics is everything, right? So right now, if you can't impact the system nationally, federally, what you can do is hold your local elected officials accountable. You can absolutely run for office, organize yourselves. A lot of times people think that in order to run for local office that they need all this money and they need, a lot of different things. And I'm not saying that that's not important because you do need to raise money. But there are people who are winning elections with much smaller budgets than those who are who have been classified like the top dog. We're seeing upsets all around the nation. So that means you can do it, and you have to see yourself as being a powerful leader that can actually make a difference, and that will be respected by your community enough that they will support you if you step out there and take that chance. So I think the local politics are important right now. It's important for us to be in the school board meetings. It's important for us to be at the city council meetings because that's where all of the local work, that's where it's happening. That's how budgets are being decided for what will happen in your children's schools, in your streets, with the services that you need to be provided in your community. And so you've got to keep your finger on that and not get so caught up in what's happening on the federal level that we let the local stuff go. Because guess what? The MAGA attitude is floating everywhere. And as you said, Keandria, you got people who are supposed to be progressive, who are on the left, far left, that don't have not a bit of respect for our communities. I see it every day. We're fighting it everywhere that you turn. Even with Mayor Mamdani, who I absolutely love and adore him. And we've had many, many conversations where I can tell that this is a man who really wants to do good. But he also has people around him and in his camp who do not believe in focusing on the needs of Black people specifically. And so that makes some decisions, have to challenge them. So we've got to stay involved locally. So that's one. Two, we know, and I know everything can't be accomplished by voting, but the midterm elections are in less, 6 months now? This is, I can't even begin to describe to you how at night I wake up in a cold sweat thinking we ain't doing enough. We're not even doing enough to get all of our people. They are trying to pass the SAVE Act right now, which is a racist voter suppression tactic to stop our communities from getting to the polls and to stop women, also women who they know are organizing against them, from being able to overthrow, if you will, this imbalanced government, right? And so we've got to focus on that. And you can organize in your local community. Do not believe that the 10 people who you touch every day are not a part of this process, and that the only way you can do this work is if you are out there organizing 1,000 people or 2,000 people. There are some of us who do that already. What we need help with is making sure that no one in your house, in your building, in your neighborhood, in your church, that none of those people think it's okay for them not to show up to the polls, or that none of them find themselves, days before the election and they're not registered to vote. That's the work right now. It is very important for us to sit back and watch how these people have been able to use government for bad, and know that we have an obligation to try our best to right side it and to protect ourselves. Because if we allow another 2 years of what is happening in this country to continue, I fear we already know that the nation has changed in a way that we will probably not be able to correct, or to correct, because I'm not going to say go back, because we can't go back to what we had either, but we won't be able to correct these things for years. It may take decades to undo some of the mess that has happened. So those things are important. Local elections. Now we're moving towards midterms. Where do you see yourself? How do you get involved? And then the third bucket, which is the bucket we don't focus on enough, is building within our own communities. As Black women and Black men are underemployed, are being pushed out of the workforce, it is a good time for us to figure out how to find one another and build. I know people that I met on social media because they were in the comments on some issue, and we met, and now they show up at my birthday parties and I support them. I know what children they had, and we're in the DMs talking, and we've become regular buddies. If we can do that because I posted a cute picture, or I posted, something about whatever issue, if we can do it for that, we can also do it to find our tribe and get to work together to support one another and to fight this thing. I think that whatever mechanisms we can develop to share truthful information with our communities is going to probably be the most important work that we do leading up to the midterms. And then, of course, you have a presidential election in 2 years, which is tomorrow as well. We've got to do that work, but we cannot leave behind the idea that there's always opportunity, even in bad moments, even when things are difficult. And all of us being out of work, very similar to how we built movements during the pandemic with somewhat of a similar crisis. We should be looking at what were some of the things we did, because some people didn't go back into the office. They built businesses. Some people found their folks and built movements. We should be thinking of doing that as well. So those are my two things. I know I'm going to try my best to do all that and more. But I think all of us have got to be thinking about ourselves as a central part of this movement, and not just an outsider who's watching from the sidelines.
Absolutely. Keandra, you want to say something?
I do. Before we get off here, I have a specific question that I want to ask you about. You mentioned something earlier when you were talking about Mom Donnie and how he has some people around him that are not focused on the needs of Black people specifically. And I feel like, and I say all the time, that all lives matter mentality, it is still very much present. It's still very
Yeah.
much present. And I see a lot, even with the Say Her Name movement. My initial question was, I was going to ask you to just elaborate a little bit on, or, to finally hear from you, essentially from the horse's mouth, why that movement was created for Black women. Because I know
Mhm.
I have seen so much pushback. Like, I have seen, for lack of a better term, hijacking. I see now anytime there is a victim, including like Renee Good, God
Renee
rest her
Good, right?
soul. It was say her name, and immediately Black women started pushing back, like, hold on, she's important, but let's not hijack a movement created for Black women. And we were called divisive. And we were called insensitive for just politely correcting, saying, hey, Say Her Name is a movement reserved for Black women. Let's focus this way, right? So I wanted to ask you how you would advise anybody who is essentially bumping into that all lives matter mentality when we are pointing out the fact that they refuse to focus on Black issues, and we're treated like the bad guy. How do you navigate that? Or how would you tell just the everyday person trying to do the work how they navigate that?
If I had a good answer for how we navigate the craziness that goes on out here, I would have my Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know. We just hustle and flow every day. One thing I know is you can't be quiet. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, you're gonna be in trouble all the time because you have to say the thing.
Yes.
And so yeah, so that's you exactly. There you go. And I don't know. I mean, I'm every day I'm trying to figure it out, just like everybody else. That our movements are co-opted. Then we accuse each other of co-opting movements that may or may not be true. And we got so many different things, balls that's in the air, that
Hmm.
all you can really do is grab one and work on that, and then grab another one and focus on that. Because if we take a bucket and let all the balls fall in and then try to address it all at the same time, we're not going to live. We're not going to
I
survive,
love
because it's
that.
just it's just too much work to be done. So I wish I had the closing bomb answer, but I'm telling you from my very vulnerable space, that if I knew how you deal with people who are insensitive to the work that it takes to build movements for Black people, all I know how to do is cuss them out, which is why I'm always in trouble, right? So I don't
You
have
and
the
I have
answer.
that
But
in
Keandria,
common.
when you figure it out, when you figure it out, you call me, and then I'm gonna be a better person, because you have the answer.
I'll let you know if I figure it out.
Well, let me just say this, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and
Thank you,
learning
Grace.
experience about the movement for justice for Breonna Taylor. But I wouldn't be the justice fighter if I didn't take a moment of personal privilege to thank you, Tamika, to
Thank you,
thank you for
Greg.
the work that you have done for the liberation of Black folks for over 30 years. You truly are a modern day Sojourner Truth, Fannie Lou
Oh,
Hamer, and our personal shero, even though she's transitioned to the other life,
mm,
Hazel N. Dukes.
yes,
And
yes,
so I just
yes.
want to thank you for coming on, for sharing your wisdom. But I also want you to always understand that you are loved by our community, that you may not have the answer that you just said you don't have the answer, but I know that you have the answer. And so I just appreciate you. And I want to say that in front of the whole world, because
Yeah,
not enough times as activists do we get our flowers while we can still enjoy our flowers. You
yes.
are one of the most consequent activists of our generation, or any generation for that matter. And so I just wanted to say that on this platform and give you your flowers while you can receive them. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you, my brother. And you know how I feel about you. I adore you. You have been, whether it be a personal problem to, of course, in this beast of a world that we're dealing with, you are constantly on the front lines for all of us. And we appreciate you, Griggs. I wish you nothing but peace and happiness and joy in your life, because I know that it is no joke when y'all are carrying that big envelope around with all those cases in it, hustling from building to building, up all night, trying to also, love on your families and take care of yourselves personally. It's no joke. I watch you, I watch Ben Crump, I watch Lee Merritt, I watch Attorney Sue Ann Robinson, and the list goes on. I don't want to get in trouble. I watch y'all, and it's a tiring job, because in the middle of trying to work on a big case that has implications for all our people, we calling you saying, "Hey, Pookie is in trouble. Can you also go? Can you also go try to get him out? Hey, Leroy's got a problem." So I thank you for the work. I thank you for being consistent and being a consistent friend to me and my family. And Keandria, I already know you're going to. This is a stop on the path towards greatness for you that you're on. And I can see it, I can hear it. The passion is there, but you also have the poise. You have all the things it takes. And if I could go back and say, no, I don't have the answer to exactly what we do, but I do know this, that grace for yourself and grace for others is a very important part of what we have to have in order for us to be able to deal with and juggle all those balls that's in the air is giving yourself grace, and then also knowing that people don't know what they don't know. Even if you think they should, they don't know what they don't know. And so grace and education, grace and education, grace and education is the work that must be done every day. And when that don't work, cuss them out. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. I've learned this just listening to you talk. You've dropped so many gems, and I truly hope that the people who are listening have caught on to a lot of the things that you have. Because I just have to say this, or it's just going to bug me. Because, not just to speculate on your age, but when you said 30 something years, hey, you look, first of all, you look amazing. Okay.
Thank
You
you.
look amazing
I'm
on top of the,
$45.
on top of the work that you have done.
Yeah,
You
thank you. I'm
absolutely.
45. I have a 27-year-old son and a 3-year-old granddaughter. And so I'm all the things at this point in my life.
And I just appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and just
Thank
giving
you.
us the wisdom. This to me is just a privilege to be on with you two to even hear you guys
Thank you.
speak about it.
And the funny thing is, you say that that's the privilege, but the privilege is for two old people, Griggs and me, to be here with you, because that's what it's all about. If you're not engaged with the next generation, then we've lost the plot. That's our
Hmm.
job, to be able to say that we have relationships, we have intergenerational relationships with those who are coming behind us. So thank you for allowing me to impart whatever wisdom I have. Thanks for allowing me to be so passionate, because baby, you get me talking about Breonna Taylor, and honey, I could go on and on and on and on, because it's such a important case for our time.
Hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I just again want to thank you. I want to thank everybody that has tuned in. It's something that I want y'all to do for us. We are going to continue to bring these cases to you, the behind the scenes, the hard work, but also the voice of the families. But we need you to do something. We need you to like, comment, and share. Because as my sister Tamika Mallory said, these algorithms don't like us talking about justice, but we
No.
can bring it to you in a way that we can get to the accountability that's necessary. So we need you to do us a favor. Like, comment, and share with 5 of your friends so we can make sure that we get this message out, because we are in a war. I mean, let's just be clear. Civil rights doesn't take a time off. Social justice doesn't take time off. And the people that we're fighting certainly don't take time off. So we
Absolutely.
need to make sure that our message is clear. We talked about earlier, it's very difficult to cut through the BS narrative that they always put out there on a victim of state-sanctioned violence. But we will aim to do that in new media. And so I just want to make sure that people understand that it's important, this work that is done. So I want to turn it back over to my co-host Keandra for her parting thought, and then we're going to kind of talk about what we just learned.
So my parting thought I would say is, um, this is one of those cases where hearing her passion and hearing that drive she still has, for me, is inspiring, because it's so easy. It's so easy to get discouraged, to see like, hey, the charges were dropped, and to feel like, hey, nobody's actually being held accountable in the way that they should be held accountable. But like she said, you grab one, you deal with it. You grab one and you deal with it. Because if you try to drop them all in one bucket, you'll be overwhelmed, right? And you won't survive. So that would be my parting thought, is to just deal with the crisis in front of you. Deal with what you can deal with. Control the controllables. And that's something that's actually random, but I learned that going to counseling with my spouse who was an addict. And we always learn control the controllables, because you spiral when you try to control everything. So I'm thinking about how we can apply that here and control the controllables. Don't get discouraged when you feel like there is no justice, because social justice is a form of justice. The court of public opinion is a form of justice, even if that person has not seen the jail time that they should have, they have not faced the charges that they should have, they will never know another day of peace after that. And that matters. And that's why we have to keep fighting. And that's why we have to keep having these conversations.
Absolutely. And what I would like to impart in this episode to kind of wrap is to remember the work that we've done. Remember the battles that we have fought. We won't win every single battle, but we will learn from every single battle. And you just heard from about and from one of the foremost activists in this space, but also one of the most pivotal cases in 2020, which was the biggest year for protests this country has ever seen. That it took hard work on the ground. It took social media organizing and old school door knocking. It took all these things for the world to take notice that the death of a Black woman will not be forgotten, and we would never stop fighting for justice. So the fight for justice for Breonna Taylor has not ended. It's just shifted into a new arena. And so what I want you to take from this is that the fight for justice continues, that we will not be silent. We will stand up, speak out, and demand justice and accountability, justice for Breonna Taylor, because it's either Bree way or the freeway.
What do you want?
Every headline fades. Every news cycle moves on. For the families, it never ends. And the fight for accountability continues. This is not about clicks. This is not about controversy. This is about the truth. The names that deserves justice. We are reopening and examining the files and the facts. Nothing more and nothing less. We're going to ask questions that people dare to ask. Because justice delayed does not mean justice denied.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Can't fail me.
This is Justice for